Welcome to the Coco Case Files podcast, where true crime meets detective training. Let's open today's case. Hello, detectives. Picture Los Angeles, January 1947. The war had just ended. Hollywood was booming, neon signs buzzing, jazz spilling out of smoky clubs. But beneath that glamour was something darker: poverty, corruption, predators who could blend into the crowd. On the morning of January 15th, a mother walking her young daughter down Norton Avenue in Leimert Park sees what she thinks is a mannequin tossed carelessly into a vacant lot. But the closer she gets, the horror takes shape. This wasn't a mannequin. It was the body of a young woman, drained of blood, mutilated, cut in half at the waist, and posed deliberately. Her name was Elizabeth Short, just 22 years old. She would forever be remembered as the Black Dahlia. Let's start with Elizabeth herself, because victimology, the study of the victim's lifestyle, risks, and habits, is the foundation of every solid investigation. Elizabeth had grown up in Massachusetts, chasing sunshine and opportunity, eventually finding her way to California. She was known for her striking looks, black hair, and her desire to break into the Hollywood scene. Friends described her as kind, polite, almost shy, but her life was unstable. She moved from couch to couch, stayed in cheap hotels, and often relied on acquaintances for money, meals, and shelter. Why does this matter? Because vulnerability attracts offenders. Investigators have to ask, who knew her routines? Who saw the opportunity to isolate her? In Elizabeth's case, her transient lifestyle put her into the orbit of many people, some harmless, others dangerous. On January 9th, she was last seen alive at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Robert Red Manley, a salesman who had been giving her rides, dropped her off there. She said she was meeting her sister. Witnesses place her in the hotel lobby. Some reports suggest she may have gone into a nearby lounge, the Crown Grill, but either way, this is the last confirmed sighting. From January 9th to January 15th, her movements are a mystery. That's 6 missing days. Detectives call this a gap in the timeline, and gaps are where the answers usually hide. Now, the discovery. Elizabeth's body wasn't just discarded, it was staged. She had been bisected cleanly at the waist, a procedure called a hemicorporectomy. That's not easy. It requires knowledge of anatomy to cut between vertebrae without splintering bone. Her face was mutilated with a Glasgow smile, her lips cut ear to ear. The body had been completely drained of blood, and most telling, there was no blood on the ground, which means the murder happened elsewhere, and the body was carefully transported and displayed. Ask yourself, why pose a body in public like this? Staging is communication. The killer wanted shock, attention, maybe even to taunt investigators. And then the letters started arriving. The Los Angeles Examiner received an envelope with Elizabeth's belongings, her social security card, birth certificate, even an address book. The letters were cut and paste ransom style, signed by the so-called Black Dahlia Avenger. Others followed. As detectives, here's what you need to remember. Communication from a possible offender is behavioral evidence. It tells you about ego, confidence, need for recognition, and even risk-taking. Was it really from the killer? Possibly. Or was it a copycat? Either way, it shaped the investigation. Now let's look at suspects, because every case turns on them. First, Robert Manley, the last man to see her alive. Detectives had to scrutinize him. He took polygraphs, answered questions, and passed truth serum tests. Inconsistent, maybe, but in the end, no hard evidence tied him to the crime. Then there was an Army corporal who confessed. He claimed he'd blacked out drunk with Elizabeth in San Francisco and thought he killed her. Investigators checked his alibi. He was on his military base the day she died. False confession. It happens more often than you think. But the suspect who looms largest is Dr. George Hoddle. He was a physician, brilliant, arrogant, and very possibly a predator. Years after the murder, his own son, Steve Hoddle, a retired LAPD detective, investigated him. Here's what stands out. George had the medical skill to perform the bisection. He was tied to Elizabeth socially. And when LAPD bugged his home, he was caught on tape saying, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now." He even referenced a missing secretary who might have talked, adding, "She's dead now." That's chilling. And yet, despite this, charges were never filed. Why? Corruption. The LAPD of the 1940s was notoriously compromised, with payoffs and backroom deals. Evidence was lost or suppressed, and once again, justice slipped away. So what can we learn? Let's be blunt. What went right? The autopsy was thorough. Forensics confirmed surgical skill. Fingerprint ID was solid. Detectives tracked down leads quickly. But what went wrong? Almost everything else. The crime scene was compromised. Witnesses weren't locked down. Media interference ran wild, and corruption buried key leads. As investigators, you need to understand, failure at the foundation kills a case. If you lose control of the scene or let outside forces dictate the narrative, you might never recover. Here are the lessons I want you to take. 1. Secure the crime scene, always. It doesn't matter if it looks like a dump site, treat it as sacred ground. 2. Build the timeline. Missing days aren't gaps, they're clues. 6 days missing here, that's the whole story. 3. Treat communication seriously. Letters, calls, notes, they're behavioral evidence. Don't dismiss them as games. 4. Resist outside pressure. Media and politics can steer investigations. The best detectives stay grounded in evidence, not headlines. So let me ask you, detectives, if you had been first on scene, what's the first mistake you'd have avoided? If you were handed the Avenger letters, how would you evaluate them? And if a suspect as strong as George Hodel surfaced today, how would you ensure politics didn't kill your case? Because that's what makes this case more than just a murder mystery. It's a mirror showing us how fragile investigations can be, and how discipline or the lack of it changes everything. This was the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short, a young woman whose life was stolen, her story twisted by corruption and chaos. For us, it's not just history, it's training. Learn from what went wrong, sharpen your instincts, and keep asking questions. You've been listening to the Coco Case Files podcast, where true crime meets detective training. Until next time, secure your scenes and trust the evidence.